Greetings and welcome to Trinity Radio. I'm Jonathan Pritchett, and with me as always is
Braxton Hunter, and you may be hearing the fizz of this Diet Mountain. Well, I wasn't going to say the brand name because I didn't want to buzz market for Diet Mountain Dew, but yes, and I'm drinking it, and we don't have.
But if you'd like to be a sponsor for the program, please email us.
We're looking at you, Diet Mountain Dew. But I'm drinking out of this. We don't have like things that say like atheist tears, like some people have liberal tear. We don't do that sort of thing. This cup was bought for me. This was bought for me by an atheist, Uber Scheiser, and I want to thank him or her.
They are
whatever.
Very, very wonderful.
So Pritchett, this is an audacious thumbnail. What are we doing here today?
Well, late last month, I think around February 21st, the Executive Committee of the Southern Baptist Convention decided to formally disfellowship Saddleback and a few other churches for having ordained women pastors. These churches, I think, were referred to at the 2022 annual meeting of the Southern Baptist for the Executive Committee to decide on. Well, they did last month. And then, after that made the news or whatever, caught wind of a conversation that Rick Warren had with Russell Moore, Christianity Today. And he had said that he was probably going to appeal this decision and wanted to kick up a fuss. So that's what I kind of wanted to talk about today and some of the points that he had made. Because, as you know, you're a complementarian, but I'm an egalitarian. So I actually side with Rick Warren's position on this for Saddleback. But I do take issue with what he's doing, and I'm not actually a fan. And I've said this many times when I stream with Nick. If you want to know like my position on that and how we exegete,
we have a whole episode, several whole episodes.
Yeah, especially on Trinity Radio Extra. There's hours of me and Nick going through that, and you will hear me say there, and I'll say again today, so it's not news flash. I'm not a big fan of all egalitarians and how they argue for the position, and so we're going to actually, two of us, one complementarian, one egalitarian, are going to kind of critique his defense of that. But before we get into that, we do want to kind of give a little bit of context to what Rick Warren had said. And I got wind of this on Twitter because Braxton encouraged me to get on Twitter more.
Real quick. I'm sure anyone watching this, Pritchett, probably already knows this, but just in case you don't, Rick Warren is a Southern Baptist, or was a Southern Baptist convention pastor. His church, Saddleback Church, is massive. I think he said it's baptized more people than any single church in the history of the United States or something like that. history. I don't know, history of the world,
history of the planet,
something like that. But and he wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, which I think sold more copies than anything but the Bible or something. And I wanted to say at the start of this that, and so the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, has ousted Rick Warren's church, Saddleback, which comprise, I think there's 6,000 related churches or something that are all. Am I getting this right, Pritchett? There are all these 6,000 churches that are affiliated with him, and are also affiliated with the SBC.
Yes.
And so we're going to talk about what Rick Warren said about that. But I did want to say right from the beginning that Rick Warren has done incredible things for the kingdom, and has, I mean, like I say, this book, Purpose-Driven Life alone, there are stories around it. Like, people have their own testimonies about how this book has changed their life. One famous example, I don't remember any of the details, but you can Google it. There was a woman who was like kidnapped or being held captive in her home, and she read the Purpose-Driven Life out loud to her captor, and he became a Christian, turned himself in, and let her go. So there are amazing things that have come out of his ministry, but that doesn't mean that we can't criticize aspects of how an individual functions. So with all of that, hopefully people are caught up on who these people are, what's happening.
And I like Rick Warren. I've never been one of those guys that gets upset with people like Rick Warren or Andy Stanley or all these people. There's a lot of hype. But you got me on Twitter, and so I caught wind of an article by Denny Burke, who was saying, well, actually, this interview he did with Russell Moore is doing us a favor. Lets us get ready for the convention. So when he tries to, hear the arguments they're going to make and all that, and there were some interesting quotes in that, which maybe go check out the whole interview. But Rick Warren, he starts with a quote.
I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yeah. He says, in my heart of hearts, I just want to walk away from it. You don't want to be where you're not wanted, right? Okay. I knew last year at the convention, but I don't think I can do that. I think it's a selfish thing to do. I think I need to stand up for the pastors who are scared to death by this inquisition, and I think I need to stand up for the millions of godly women whose gifts and leadership skills are being stymied. So I'm going to most likely appeal it, not for my benefit. We don't need it. We don't need the Southern Baptist Convention. They need the 6,000 purpose-driven churches that are in the Southern Baptist Convention and our fellowship. But we don't need the convention. But it would be for the benefit of others, not us. Now, I'm a cynical guy.
What?
I mean, and I'm saying, when I see something like that, I don't need y'all, but y'all need us. I'm kind of like...
Well, let's just appreciate the boldness in a statement like that.
Yeah, right? I do appreciate the boldness.
There's nothing wrong with saying it if it's true and necessary.
But I don't think it's true and necessary that the Southern Baptist Convention doesn't need any one single... I mean, there's 44,000 churches in the SBC?
Well, 44,000 minus 6,000 would be quite a dramatic change. They wouldn't like that very much. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Well, number one, it's not like he beamed his Sunday service into all 6,000 of these churches. These are all their own churches that are in that fellowship, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know that all of them are going to leave or have left simply because he got disfellowshipped a few weeks ago.
Be a good thing to know, yeah.
So I'd like to know that first. Are they all
Either way, he does represent 6,000 churches that are SBC affiliated in some sense. They're affiliated with him in some sense. He started them, planted them, whatever. Yeah,
but I don't know that they would all go just because he did on this. That's kind of a bit, that's almost cult leader-ish to me, in a sense that since I'm disfellowshipped, I'm taking these people with me, right?
Well, I get what you're saying, and obviously the nice cop over here is going to be like, right. But I'm just saying, as the person kind of representing the other side here, that, and we'll get to, somebody says, why is he ousted? It has to do with women serving in a pastoral position. But when we're going to talk about that too, a little bit. But it's just to say it is relevant to get the facts on the table if you're going to try to actually appeal something, make a difference. And the facts that he's going to lay on the table, it's not irrelevant that I got a whole bunch of Southern Baptists that may side with me, and we have more reason.
Well, that's the key. But that's not what he said.
But that's true.
He said you don't need us and the 6,000 churches that are both you, but they're also me.
You think he's being presumptuous to speak on their behalf?
I don't know what their arrangement is. If they're like, are they obedient churches, or are they like just kind of how they cooperate? I don't know the ins and outs of all that. I would be surprised if they weren't their own autonomous churches, though, that don't have to bend the knee to Rick Warren's ring and kiss it. I don't know. But
But either way, it seems like, come on, man, why are you throwing that out there?
Right.
Type thing. Maybe because you just ousted me.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, I don't. But my thing is, I don't know that all of them would leave just because he got this fellowship.
Right. Okay. Well, that point is down. Go ahead.
Okay. The next point I want to say is, I'm doing this for all of those other churches who might be afraid. Well, the way I see it is, the Southern Baptist Church, the Southern Baptist Convention is a bunch of autonomous churches, right? Mm-hmm. And what I understand is, there's no mystery about what the Southern Baptist Church believes in its Baptist faith and message. And yes, of course, not every church has to affirm that. Not every member of the Southern Baptist
The Southern Baptist Convention has a statement, the Baptist
Faith and Message.
The most recent one is from 2000.
Yeah.
And it lays out a list, it lays out the theological and doctrinal positions that
most Southern Baptists
hold, and there are very few things that are just like distinctives of Southern Baptists.
Right. The two that come to mind, I say that, I mean, there's like tons of Baptist denominations out there. And I think the eternal security issue and the complementarianism are the two things that they hold in distinctive that are probably different than several other Baptist traditions. Mm-hmm. Free will Baptists, for example, the General Baptists, they reject eternal security. There might, Missionary Baptists, I don't know if they have a statement about that or not. I don't know. I haven't read their statement. But there's like all kinds of Baptists. But like where I'm from in Arkansas, you got Free Will Baptists and you got Southern Baptists. And they differ on eternal security. But that's one of the issues. And then, of course, complementarianism is one of the issues that makes Southern Baptists. So all these millions of women. And
complementarianism and egalitarianism have to do with roles that men and women have.
Right.
Egalitarians will think that men and women have can serve in the same roles in church. Obviously, they recognize differences between men and women, obviously. But I should say, obviously, in this culture, it should be obvious. And then complementarians say no, that they have different. They're equal in value before the Lord, but they complement each other in terms of roles.
Right.
They don't have the same roles
and
necessarily.
But there's no mystery what the SBC believes,
mm-hmm.
And so when he says he's speaking up for millions of women, well, if the issue is ordained as pastor, there's millions and millions of men and women in the SBC that are not wanting to become pastor, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. But there are all sorts of things that both men and women can do in ministry in a complementarian denomination like the SBC. So I don't know what.
So what did he do that got him kicked out? Go ahead, because people are asking.
Okay, what did he do to get?
And if C. Denise asks anything, it's immediately deserves to get answered.
Yes, he ordained. I think it was like a husband and wife team to be like co-lead pastors of a church
after him or something.
Yeah,
or one of the churches
to take over.
I think the main church, Saddleback, right?
Yeah, and I think that there's several women in different positions of ministry that. Some Southern Baptist churches will have a children's minister that's a woman, and
but that's why she asked, did he ordain them?
Yeah.
Or just place them in associate pastor position?
Yeah. I think he ordained them as pastors, which I think there's a conversation to be had. At this church, the children's pastor is a children's pastor. He gets the word pastor because it's a dude, but at this Southern Baptist church, she'll get, because she's a woman, and I think that's goofy. And so I understand, and part of what he was complaining about, getting hung up about labels, but that's not the issue. The issue is the role of like elder pastor type officer of the church. Mm-hmm. And again, I believe, like Rick Warren does, that women can hold that position, but the Southern Baptist Convention does not affirm that. And so I don't know what he means by he's going to speak up for like all of these people that are intimidated by this or whatever, as if there's like this legion of quiet egalitarians in the SBC. Now, I know that there are some discernment ministry bloggers who probably think that there's this whole cabal of secret egalitarians out to destroy the Southern Baptist Convention.
Well, out to destroy, I don't know about that, but I would not be surprised to find out that
that's how they would say
particularly among younger pastors, it's probably more prevalent than it used to be.
Probably more prevalent than they used to be, but do those churches, are they just out there ordaining women left and right? No. Are they not ordaining women because they're all stymied in fear and intimidation? I don't think so. I think most Southern Baptists actually agree with that, and I think that a lot of these women that he's claiming to speak for, I think we were talking earlier about male saviorism kind of being a thing. Like, I'm going to go stick up for all these millions of women that... I don't know that there's millions of anybody in the SBC trying to be pastors, but I do believe that these women can think for themselves, and if they agree with your wife,
you think it's insulting in some sense.
A little bit, yeah, because like
these women in SBC churches couldn't. Your position is, at least all things being equal, like there are circumstances where perhaps there's abuse or certain kind of control going on or whatever, but your position is, if these women hold that position or think it's probably true, and they recognize that their church, that they can look around and recognize, okay, my church believes this, but I think the Bible says this, so why don't I go to a different church? Right. Now, I pushed back a little bit on that before the show with you because I can kind of see it being the case, and I cover things like this in my book, Letters to Ignorantia, or From Ignorantia. And I can't remember the title, but this notion that
ask your ghostwriter, right?
Yeah, ask my ghostwriter. She'll have to inform me. It's a woman. She can say that way. If anybody ever takes offense, like, well, a woman wrote it. Yeah. But anyway, what am I saying? Oh, woman in the SBC. So if she decide, I think I could see a lot of people, male and female, who are just kind of like they're Christians and they do mean it, but they're not professional ministers. And even though you and I would say, and a lot of our viewers would say, no, they need to be studying the Bible. They need to be going deeper. And of course, that's what we want. But they do love Jesus, and they are trying. But here's the thing. They're not aware of all of these nuanced doctrinal positions. And sometimes they do just kind of let things kind of wash over them, and they take it in passively, some of this theology. And so a woman may just take it that, well, I trust my church, and this is their view on this, and so I guess it's not for me.
I don't think it's necessarily, unless you're in a cult, that it's a bad thing that you trust your typical Southern Baptist pastor, that he's not intentionally trying to... See, I don't think any Southern Baptist pastor, like, you are a complementarian Southern Baptist pastor. Mm-hmm. You weren't trying to steer women away from either learning about other positions or trying to sinister, twirl your mustache, trying to keep them from ever discovering this truth that, oh, you really could be a pastor. But, I mean, you're not out to get them. They should trust you, right? I mean, and if you don't agree with your pastor,
they can trust that I'm definitely telling them what I absolutely believe.
But I think women are, capable of coming to their own conclusions about those things, insofar as they've ever thought about it. And since most women don't think about, I want to be a pastor anyway, because most people in churches don't think about that, how big of an issue are we talking about here? Even in your scenario, that there might be that one that's being held in the dark.
Or has a real hard-nosed husband or father who has given them the impression that it is like, that she cannot question these sorts of things. And so she's put in a weird situation, which we're all put in at one time or another, but not quite this situation, where she has to feel like she's doing something wrong if she thinks maybe I should break with my denomination. I don't know. Let me get to Jim Amberg first, because he's the channel angel.
Yes, he is.
And thank you for that, Jim Amberg. He doesn't even like for us to mention it when he does that. And then I also wanted to get to someone who I think nailed what you were trying to say, but now I don't know what
Well, while you find that, I just want to say, our good friend, the New Testament theologist, Nick Quint's probably going to be screaming at the screen to see an egalitarian take up for complementarians, but that's what I'm doing today. I'm taking up for the complementarians today.
Caleb says, I think it's pretty simple. He entered an agreement with the SBC and knew their guidelines. He broke them and suffers the consequences. It's because the Baptist faith and message. Well, go on with it. You have a plan for walking through this.
We'll bring up the next quote.
Okay. Bye, Caleb. All right. Here you go.
Southern Baptists have always been anti-creedal. Go read the preamble of the Baptist Faith and Message, which it says this is not binding on anybody. It says it in the preamble. This is not binding on any church. But now we're turning it a confession into a creed and we're weaponizing it. We're starting an inquisition. But this is actually not true. This is something that Denny Burke pointed out. Look at me siding with Denny Burke, a person that probably disagree with me on Calvinism, egalitarian, all numerous things. But he brought up the fact, bring up the SBC Constitution. Now, that's Article 3 of the SBC Constitution says composition. The convention, that's the Southern Baptist Convention, shall consist of messengers who are members of Baptist churches in cooperation with the convention. The following subparagraphs describe the convention's current standards and method of determining the maximum number of messengers the convention will recognize from each cooperating church to attend the convention's annual meeting. 1. The convention will only deem a church to be in friendly cooperation with the convention and sympathetic with its purposes and work, i.e. a cooperating church, as that term is used in the convention's governing documents, which, and here's the key point, I think Denny Burke was right to highlight this, has a faith and practice which closely identifies with the convention's adopted statement of faith. By way of example, churches which act to affirm, approve, or endorse homosexual behavior would be deemed not in cooperation with the convention. So it says by way of example, right? That's just one issue. Mm-hmm. Now, the Baptist Faith and Message does take a position on this, and it does take a position on women pastors. And so
it's kind of like Caleb said. It's like, look, man, you were a part of an organization, and you affirmed what that organization affirms until 3 years ago, because he had this change of heart about the doctrine 3 years ago. And so you used to be a part of this, you agreed with this, and then all of a sudden, well, maybe not all of a sudden, but one day you decided that's not where I am anymore. And it looks to people like Caleb and to me to a certain degree like, well, I'll just change the organization then.
Right. And so I see, as much as I'm an egalitarian.
Wait, before you go on, you'll be glad I did this, because here is Derek.
Our good friend Derek.
And Derek says, my good friend Sarah, a great name, Sarah with an H. I got a Sarah with an H, is a first-time listener today. Can she get a shout-out? Sarah! There it is. She got a ministry directed towards the New Age and ex-New Agers.
Nice.
So that is fantastic. That's something you can get on board with.
Yes, and joining up with the likes of like Melissa Doherty and doing the Lord's work and that. That's awesome. Way to go, Sarah.
We are all for you, Sarah, and perhaps we can have you on sometime. And Derek, thank you for that super chat.
So I would love for the SBC to be egalitarian, because I think that's the correct position, but they're not. You know what? And because they're not, they have more important to me than how I feel, how you feel, how Rick Warren feels about secondary issue. The question is not, are they right or wrong about the doctrine? The question is, does the Southern Baptist Convention have the right to determine the boundaries of cooperation? Jonathan,
and here's a point that should maybe have been one of the first points made is, look, if it is the case, like whether you agree or disagree about the theological point, right? Because you agree with Rick Warren and disagree with the Southern Baptist Convention on the theological point of women as pastors, all right? But you're saying there's a right and a wrong way to handle your new belief about that, right? And it seems to me that even if you agree with him about this, we do not want to set up a situation where 40-something thousand churches and millions of people suddenly are faced with a denominational wide change in how their denomination functions, all because one person who had a huge following was able to come in and put pressure and make such a change. I mean, think about what that could do in 20 years from now with gender ideology and things like that.
Right. I was about to say, it smacks of the same kind of almost narcissistic behavior to say, I believe this, and because I believe this particular thing, everyone else needs to change the way that they interact with me because of my personal belief. Yeah. And that's what Rick Warren's saying. 40, or let's give him a 6. 38,000 SBC churches need to change the way that they understand cooperation because I changed my mind about something.
So we got Chris Tate. Let's say Chris Tate is a Southern Baptist. Chris Tate's a YouTuber, professor, all those things, and has a big following. Let's say Chris Tate is a member of the Southern Baptist Convention, and man, they love him. He's got all the stuff, that they want. But then one day he has a change of heart about the nature of hell, as he did, and he accepts this view called conditional immortality. And let's just say that the Baptist Faith and Message actually ruled that out.
Yeah.
Okay? And Chris Tate suddenly has this change of heart, and he really believes this is important, right? And he does. But then he says, everybody, now I'm so convinced that this is important, and so convinced that so many people are living under the fear of eternal conscious torment wrongly, that I'm going to, or actually he wouldn't say that, but I'm going to try to ensure that this whole denomination changes because of this new view that I've come to adopt.
Right. That's just, there's a little bit of.
Do we want that going forward?
No, we don't. I think there's a little. Oh, and by the way, the New Age to Jesus Diaries. I guess that's the name of Sarah's channel. Everyone, go check out the channel.
Check it out.
And subscribe if it's good. Right. Mm-hmm. Or subscribe anyway. That's what I say. Even I've told so many people, subscribe to Theology Geek Fitness, even if you never watch a video.
Well, here's the thing: you don't want people to subscribe to your channel if you know they're not going to watch it, because then that just doesn't work for you in the algorithms and stuff.
Yeah,
you know.
I don't know how YouTube works. So
it's a great mystery.
You don't try to make everyone change their beliefs about cooperation simply because you think you need to still be included. Because on the other side of, I'm going to take me and my 6,000 churches away from you, we're going to, we don't need you, but you need us. The flip side of that is the Southern Baptist Convention is so committed to their belief, right or wrong, they're committed to it that they're willing to lose that.
Well,
that's admirable too. That's like, no, I mean, we don't want you guys to go, but this is our doctrinal statement. This is our standard of cooperation, and so props to the SBC for being willing to lose that over their conviction. I don't think their conviction is right. You think that they're right.
But you understand why they hold it, and you
I understand why they hold it, and I admire them for saying, what if we lost all 6,000 churches? This is our conviction. Until we change this Baptist faith and message, and to require in our Constitution that you need to be, within the bounds of that for cooperation, at least loosely,
This is the problem that is often faced from people in the religious realm. I'm not saying this is about Rick Warren, but when people think about denominations and how they work and about evangelicalism as opposed to other things, like sometimes, like some people in the in more left-leaning churches and things like that,
like mainline Anglican, Episcopalian type stuff.
It's just that we really mean it, and I'm not saying they don't mean it. I'm saying when we look at our standards, we mean it. We believe this stuff is real. We think it's backed up by reasons to believe that it's true. And so as a result of that, we take it seriously, even if it hurts people's feelings and works against what appears to be our own self-interest in the moment.
Yeah.
And I realize that seems shocking and it may not seem inclusive or something, but you have to have convictions and you have to stand by them. Otherwise, what are we doing here? And
it's okay for SBC to be complementarians. I'm an egalitarian, but I'm telling you, it's okay to be a complementarian. It's okay to be an annihilationist. It's okay to affirm eternal security. It's okay to be a Calvinist. But if, you're trying to be a Methodist, like the good kind, and you're a Calvinist, maybe not going to work. So why would you even want to go there, right?
Well, somebody said this a while ago. I think it was Jim Amberg. So Jim, let's see, is he the one that said it? But basically he said that I was at a Calvinist church, or maybe he says he goes to a Calvinist church. I don't know. And so as a result, he doesn't make a stink about it. It's fine. Well, if I had a Calvinist pastor, to this day, ever since I pastored in my 20s, to this day, some of those people and some of the people from churches I've been to ask me this occasionally, I have a Calvinist pastor and I'm not a Calvinist. What do I do? Well, keep going to church. I mean, this is your brother. This is your sister, right? These are your brothers and sisters. And so why would you? Now, this is what I tell them. If that fact, and I'd say this to a Calvinist who's in a non-Calvinist church, if that fact is going to, if you can deal with that and eat the chicken and spit out the bones where you happen to disagree and live peacefully there and function in the church in the ways that you're supposed to function in the church and receive what you're supposed to receive from the church. If you can do all that, then who cares that he's a Calvinist?
Right.
On the other hand, if you're going to cause a stink, if you, as the non-Calvinist who agrees with me, are going to bring this up every chance you get because you just can't take it, then maybe don't go to that church anymore.
Yeah, so my example is, not all Calvinist churches are the same. Like my friend John Winters, childhood friend, he was pastor of Remount, I was the outreach pastor, right? He knew I was not a Calvinist. Mm-hmm. He didn't care. I still preached, one Sunday every 4 to 6 weeks or whatever, he would say, "Hey, you preach this Sunday. I want to hear you preach or whatever. You take this Sunday." And of course, usually I wasn't necessarily preaching on a text that dealt with election or predestination or foreknowledge or anything like that anyway. And so like 90% of both of our sermon content, it didn't matter. Like, well, I nitpick every sermon, but that's besides the point. But you know what I'm saying? I didn't have like serious doctrinal hang-ups, and he didn't have hang-ups with anything I was saying on text unrelated to that debate. And he didn't care. He's happy for me to preach and take the Sunday off, not just sit and listen to a sermon. But there are other Calvinist churches or non-Calvinist churches that might have a problem with letting anyone with anything, because, they might say certain buzzwords, they might like, I don't want you smuggling in your understanding of sovereignty if it's like a provision it's just ate up about a Calvinist preacher. Or, I don't want you talking about free will unless we're compatibilists and what you mean by free will. So if they're not, but not, I think most people, like pastors, aren't ate up about that. It's like, a non-Calvinist comes in, okay, cool, he's going to preach on Philippians 3 or something. Like, who cares?
Yeah. Jim Amberg says, you quietly sing hymns in your head when they're on Romans rants, not related to the sermon topic. Other than that, you do what everyone else is doing.
There you go.
That's how you get through.
See, it all depends on the church thing. But when we're talking about a denomination, and the overwhelming majority of the denomination said in 2000, these are the things that we're going to... And again, the SBC wrote the Baptist Faith and Message to be intentionally non-specific on certain hang-ups and things, which we will talk about more later. But this they're pretty clear about, right? And in their constitution, they say they just use homosexuality, which is specified in the thing, as one example, but there is other examples in the Baptist Faith and Message that distinguish them, that they take a pretty clear position on. And so they have the right to decide, in my opinion. And I think Rick Warren is making a bad move thinking he's going to appeal this. Pull up the third quote.
Sure.
Oh yeah, I believe millions of Southern Baptist women their talent and their spiritual gifts are being wasted. And if the Southern Baptists don't want them, I'll take them, and I'll help them find a place to serve and glorify God with the spiritual gifts they were given. Well, there's plenty of Southern Baptist churches that have women exercising their spiritual gifts. Women, including your wife and my wife, actually, who you tell me to be a good egalitarian and listen to the...
His wife's a complementarian.
So our wives are both complementarian.
Be a good egalitarian, do what your complementarian wife says,
right,
and be a complementarian.
Right. So, I mean, there are women in Baptist traditions. We were we're not Southern Baptists now, and you're not a Southern Baptist now, but we used to be Southern Baptists, and they were complementarian. While we were all a Southern Baptist, and they used their gifts in their own ways, and they didn't care that they couldn't be pastors, and they actually agreed that women shouldn't be. There are women like that. So I'm curious about these millions of women that he is
but what people don't know about you is that you have videos to go along with this that you want to look at. Yes,
and so brings me to the next thing.
Okay. I hoped it would.
Folks, I'm like I said earlier in the podcast, there are... I love a lot of good, biblical, faithful egalitarians, but a lot of them they use the worst ways of defending the position. Now, Rick Warren, we're going to look at some of his reasons why in a couple of clips, is not the worst. By any stretch of the imagination, is he not the worst, right? He's certainly nowhere near the top tier defenders of egalitarianism. So let's hear some statements from Rick Warren about this shift. I guess we'll set it up with the first clip.
To get the refreshing sound of my diet.
Some of them would probably say, well, the Confession of Faith says that the office of pastor is to be held by men qualified by Scripture. And Saddleback now has women pastors. How do you see that?
Well, in the first place, Southern Baptists have always been anti-creedal. I grew up with the phrase, we have no creed but Christ, we have no book but the Bible. This is not a battle between liberals and conservatives. All the liberals left a long time ago. Everybody in the SBC believes in the inerrancy of Scripture. Now we're talking about difference of interpretation. Those particular passages, Titus, Timothy, and Corinthians, have literally hundreds of interpretations. We should be able to expel people over sin, racism, sexual abuse, other sexual sins, things like that. But this is over. You mean, wait a minute, we can disagree over the atonement. We can disagree over election, and we can disagree over dispensationalism. We can disagree over the second coming. We can disagree over the nature of sin, but we can't disagree over what you name your staff.
Wait. I'm coming back to you.
Yeah.
Here we are.
So this illustrates the point that I made earlier. Okay, I agree that it's not a battle of conservatism versus liberal theology. I think the Southern Baptist Convention overwhelmingly conservative theologically. Egalitarians, there's a lot of egalitarians that are conservative. Now, not all egalitarians are conservative theological. There are no liberal complementarians that I'm aware of, right?
Right.
But there
the Venn diagram's a little whack here.
Right. But I think within the SBC, even if you're an egalitarian, like I'm conservative theologically, right? So that's fair. In the SBC, at least, they're conservative. But as I mentioned earlier, the Southern Baptist Convention convened a panel to construct of theologians, pastors, etc., professors, whatever, to construct the Baptist faith and message. They decided what they wanted to be vague about. I'm just going to say
ambiguous.
Ambiguous about certain things, and what they wanted to be absolutely clear on intentionally. The Southern Baptist Convention has in my opinion, where I think Rick Warren's going off the rails here, the Southern Baptist Convention has every right to say, we are going to differ on the end times. We're going to make a vague statement that Jesus wins in the end, essentially, right? But I mean, about the nature and extent of the atonement, we have all agreed that we're not going to be firm on that. Mm-hmm. We have agreed not to be firm on all of these issues. The continuation or the cessation of the sign gifts, for example. They don't take a position on that. We're going to just make statements that say something, but not much, right? It's kind of what it is. You know, there's some good things in there. But they have the right to decide.
Some good things in the Baptist faith and message.
Right.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. But they have the right to decide that those are issues that we are going to agree to disagree upon, and the right to decide what issues they are not going to disagree on. And I'm going to stand up for the SBC's right to determine that for themselves, more than I'm going to say, just because you fell out of cooperation over a specific thing that they drilled down on and explicitly said, this is our position.
Yeah, like this is one of the few things they were real clear about.
Right.
Yeah, that's what you're trying to say.
And
it's
you're
like,
trying to say, I'm going to fight them because even though the Constitution that says they can do this to me, because this is one of those things that they're clear about, I'm going to say because it's non-binding on churches, sure, but I think when you become an egalitarian, you are no longer within loose association with their doctrinal statement, such as it is, because that is explicitly rejected in their doctrinal statement. So I think something that is explicitly rejected in their doctrinal statement can be used under that article in the Constitution that we just read to disfellowship people as not having, enough of a similar belief system. So, that's where I'm at on that. But anyway...
Well, New Testament theologist is helpful here, as we might expect that he would be. He said, well, to be fair, the BF&M 2000 is clear. But then he says, not all Southern Baptists are fine with the 2000, and some prefer the 1963.
That is true. Mm-hmm. And some Southern Baptist churches don't care at all about it. Or probably there are probably some Southern Baptists out there who've never even heard of the Baptist Faith and Message 2000, right? So what? The SBC has the right to the executive committee, because of the way that they're structured as an organization of cooperating churches, has the right to decide these things.
Now, Maria says, and I agree with her, women have the Great Commission commanded to them. They are to preach the gospel, as are all Christians. Women shouldn't be the leader of a church, but can preach, i.e. Beth Moore. In other words, this is the soft complementarianism that I was raised with, frankly.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into that.
Women can preach and women can teach, but perhaps the position of elder, it's never seems permitted explicitly in Scripture.
And we'll get into that more of that here in a minute.
I thought that might segue you, Pritchett.
But the thing that I wanted to, that first clip, also I wanted to point out in that first clip, that you see that he did mention Titus in 1 Timothy, but said nothing about it. So let's go to the next clip.
First, I understand why people get upset about this, because I believed the way they did until 3 years ago. And I actually had to change because of Scripture. Culture could not change me on this issue. Anecdotes could not change me on this issue. Pressure from other people would not change me on this issue. What changed me was when I came to confrontation with 4 scriptures nobody ever talked about that I felt had strong implications about women in ministry. And nobody had ever shown it to me. I knew the Titus passage. I knew the Timothy passage. I knew 1 Corinthians. And every time people say, why don't you have women pastors? I say, show me a verse. You give me one verse, I'll consider it, because I'm a Bible guy. I can't just say, well, everybody's doing it. Or I've been to 165 countries and I've seen churches of 30, 40, 50,000 people led by a senior pastor who's a woman. That's not enough for me. I have to have a biblical basis.
Now, that's all fine and good. Now, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that this was not a cultural thing. Mine was not a cultural thing. I mean, I changed mine on the basis of study.
You caved to the culture, Pritchett.
Of course.
You thought, I can't be seen as this gruff, overly masculine, conservative brute.
Yeah.
I must be seen as the French model that I am.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly it. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he came to this conclusion on the basis of study, but there's no evidence of it because, again, in that clip, the second time he mentions, I know this passage in 1 Timothy 2 and Titus, and I know the passage in 1 Corinthians 14. He never, in the rest of this thing, talks about those passages again. And this is
Would you call that soft peddling?
Yeah,
he's basically bringing them up so that he knows.
Right.
And giving the impression, whether this was an intention or not, that I dealt with it because I did reference it.
Yes.
And then moving on.
Yes. And I want to tell all of my egalitarian friends, this is what you don't do. Because 1 Timothy 2, 12 and following, or, and you can start in verse 8 if you want to, the instructions to men, and give it some whatever. The 1 Timothy chapter 2 passage is what everyone thinks of first that knows anything about the conversation. And I'm just as a hint to all of my, just as a helpful thing, that's the first thing that they're going to think of, and that's the first thing that you should exegete and deal with, period. If you are an egalitarian, you cannot try to create this whole house and then say, I'm going to take this one verse that everyone's waiting for you to talk about anyway because it's the one that the people like Braxton think is their silver bullet. You can't just foul it off. You have to deal with that text. I don't think Titus 2 is that important. I don't think that
you don't think
1
Titus
Corinthians
2 is important
in this debate, and I don't think that 1 Corinthians 14, what is it, 33 through, I don't. There's a lot of different, but I also want to say that there's not hundreds of interpretations, right? There's maybe like 2 or 3 complementary readings that mayay have some
and the same
nuance,
on the other side.
And there's maybe 4 or 5 on the other side,
yeah.
But 3 of them are garbage. So are not, and 2 of them, go listen to Nick Quint and I on theology. Trinity Radio Extra.
And then to get the other side of it, Joshua Tanis says, Mike Winger's series on this question is fanatic. So check out that fanatic series.
Yeah, I'm sure it's also fantastic. I'm not going to go
It's fantastic too?
Yeah. I'm not going to go, I'm assuming it's Mike, but I'm not going to go listen to 50 hours of some Christian blathering on YouTube on the same topic.
That's what you're doing right now.
I know. Well, but we have a different topic every week.
Okay.
Yeah. So
what else you got for us?
So now he's gonna get into his
case.
His case.
Biblical case.
Yes.
And we claim that we believe the Great Commission is for everybody. Both men and women are to fulfill the Great Commission. Well, not really. You don't believe that because it says there are 4 verbs in the Great Commission. Go, make disciples, baptize, and teach. Women are to go. Women are to make disciples. Women are to baptize. And women are to teach, not just men. Now, this is one of the reasons why Saddleback has baptized more people than any church in American history. 57,000 adult baptisms in 43 years. Why? Because in our church, if you led to Christ, you get to baptize them. So if a mom wants to baptize her child or a wife wants to baptize her husband that she led to Christ, anybody can baptize anybody they led to Christ. 57,000 baptisms. It's the liberation, the emancipation of every member as a minister that truly, we believe in the priesthood of the priest most of the time instead of the priesthood of the believer. Now, Great Commission, go, make disciples, baptize, teach. You can't say, well, the first 2 are for men and women, the last 2 are only for men, or maybe just ordained men. That's eisegesis. That's you got a problem. Who authorized women to teach? Jesus. All authority is given to me, therefore teach. All authority is given to me, therefore baptize. You got a problem with the Great Commission.
So if I go back in time to my complementarian days,
where would you go?
Well, I was younger. I don't care
20s,
about being younger.
Early 20s?
Yeah, 20s, early to mid 20s.
Early to mid 20s?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I was to go back in time, I could have listened to that and
you were
said,
less attractive than you are now.
That's true. I'm fine wine. But.
You're much better looking now.
I posted a picture on my Facebook wall. I was like, people ask, don't you wish you were young again? I was like, me? No. And I posted a picture of me when I was young and I was doing some goofy dance.
Would you say you're more comfortable in your skin now than you've ever been?
Yes.
Well, you should be.
Yes.
You're a beautiful man.
Thank you.
Continue on.
So if I was putting on my complementarian hat, back in time, I could say, I agree with everything that he just said,
Mm-hmm.
but that has nothing to do about the formal structure of the local church and her offices. And say, can women teach people stuff? Sure. Can women baptize? Sure. Now I know there's going to be some diehard complementarians out there that or even just people in general. I guess you could technically be an egalitarian and say only ordained people. And if you're a complementarian, that means only ordained men can like administer the Lord's Supper and
that's
baptism
Baptist stuff. Yeah.
But you could be a complementarian and say, no, I don't think that you have to be ordained in order to baptize. If you're a woman and you're sharing the gospel with another woman or a man, and they repent and believe the gospel, and then they're like, hey, there's water. They're
that's
like
my
the eunuch.
position.
They're like, hey, there's water, like in Acts, the eunuch.
Everyone, that's my position.
Oh, no, I'm not an ordained minister with my certificate from Lifeway, right? I can't.
Right, that's what I say. You got to have the Lifeway TM. But here's the thing, is I would do that, but if I'm in a Southern Baptist church, and I know that particular church prefers to have the ordained minister do that because that's how they've done it, and that's blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, big deal. But do I personally have a problem with it? No.
Right.
And do a lot of the churches I've been in, a lot of the Southern Baptist churches I've been in most of them, the vast majority do think of those two functions as being things that the ordained ministers do.
See, that's not my experience with
but
churches.
That's not been my complete experience. And there are, especially among younger Southern Baptists, it seems to be that,
you lead them to Christ and, hey, there's water, go baptize. Technically you could, but my point is you could be a complementarian and be like, I'm okay with women out there preaching the gospel to people, witnessing. I'm okay with people giving information about Christian stuff to both men and women, right? I'm okay with teaching, right? I'm okay with women baptizing, all of that. All those four things I just mentioned, you could be a complementarian and affirm all that and then still ask Rick Warren, yeah, but what does that have to do with women holding offices of ordained ministry in the church function and church proper?
As we predicted, a soft complementarian, I think, Maria, that's how, from what I'm seeing, says, I feel we have confused the role of being a pastor and preacher and have confused serving the church, as all believers should, with holding an office. Serving the body of Christ doesn't need a title. Yeah, so... Well, maybe she's not making the point that I think, but maybe she is. The thing I wanted to say is, like we've always said, there's apostle and then there's apostle. There's evangelist and then there's evangelist. You have these capital expressions that is an office in the church expressly mentioned in like Ephesians 4:11 or something. Yeah. And then you have people doing the things that people in that office do. Every Christian should teach. But not every Christian is a capital T teacher. Every Christian should do some pastoral things, but they're not necessarily a pastor. Every Christian should evangelize. That doesn't mean that they serve the office of evangelist.
Right, and of course some of those offices, like in Ephesians, right, when we're talking about Ephesians 4:11 or whatever, is, I think, because of apostle, like local churches don't have, I think that you could have, like, you can have the office of evangelism or evangelist. It doesn't necessarily be a local church office, but it is a corporate, global, universal church office, right? Like apostle or whatever. So however you want to shake that out. So the Baptist Faith and Message never says that the office of evangelist must be a woman even, right?
Right.
It makes no claim on that.
Right.
So you could even be a Southern Baptist complementarian and say, women can be evangelists.
Guess what? I was the president of the Conference of Southern Baptist Evangelists in 2010 and 11. And I can tell you we had a lot of women. Or at least we had women.
Women evangelists. Members of the
members.
conference.
Paying members.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so that's that. I didn't hear any positive case for why women should be ordained. And let's go to his next one.
Okay.
The second thing that changed my mind was the day of Pentecost. Two things happened on that day. We know the first day of the church as its birth is the church at its best. On that day, at Pentecost, we know women were in the upper room. We know women were filled with the Holy Spirit. We know that women were preaching in languages that other people couldn't hear to a mixed audience. We know women, it wasn't just men. Women were preaching on the day of Pentecost. How do we know that? Because Peter felt obligated to explain it. And so in Acts chapter 2, verses 17 and 18, he goes, hey guys, these people aren't drunk. What you're seeing was foretold by Joel. It was going to happen. And he said, and so he explains why you're now seeing women preaching on the very first day of the church. He explains it. And he says, this is that Joel predicted. And here's what he says. In the last days, and clearly that means Peter thought the last days began with the birth of the church. We're in the latter of the last days now. We don't know how many more there will be, but the last days began with the birth of the church. Peter says, in the last days, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. All flesh. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. That's different than the Old Testament.
Yeah, but again, this is a case of evangelism in the middle of the streets of Jerusalem, right? Where men and women are both prophesying, they're both speaking in tongues, and they're both proclaiming the good news or whatever before it gets, honed in on Peter's sermon. As an egalitarian, I have to remind you that that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about
even as an egalitarian,
yes,
you have to remind us.
Yeah. That passage does not have anything to do with offices in the local church congregation. And that's what the SBC is saying is specifically for women. And so they're going to tell you egalitarians, you try to use that verse to say women can be pastors hold the office of pastor or elder in a local church using something that, an instance of street evangelism, I don't think is going to be convincing to anyone.
To preach is to proclaim the truth.
Yes.
And women go around proclaiming the truth all the time. So let's take a look at the poll real quick, Pritchett.
Okay.
Let's see how we're doing. Should Rick Warren appeal Saddleback's disfellowship from the SBC? 82% say no. That's our position, right?
Yeah.
17% say yes. That's not our position, right?
Right.
So 17% of people out of, what is this? We got 40 votes. So...
yeah.
Maybe I don't know if you can change your vote, but if we've convinced you, or if we've made you, if you started out thinking he should not appeal, but we've actually said some things that worked against us, and now you think he definitely should appeal, well, change your vote. Whatever you want to do. We want to see where this goes.
Right.
All right, go ahead.
Next clip.
Okay, next clip. We're almost through these. I think it's.
And
this
all
one.
of a sudden, I noticed that the very first sermon, the very first Christian sermon, the message of the gospel of good news of the resurrection, Jesus chose a woman to deliver it to men. He had Mary Magdalene go and tell the disciples. Now, that clearly wasn't an accident. It was intentional. It's a whole new world, baby. Now he has a woman go tell the apostles. Can a woman teach an apostle? Evidently did it on the first day. He chose her to be the first preacher of the gospel.
Whoops.
There again. This is a woman going to give information to men. It's like if you're a woman in a church and there's people outside praying and having a little mini revival, and the pastor sitting in his office has no idea what's going on. She says, hey, there's something happening in the parking lot. Go check that out. It's pretty cool. There's this thing that's happening. A lot of egalitarians use this. But complementarians, maybe not the most diehard complementarians out there, but complementarians think that women should go preach the gospel. And women can teach people things. Like, a lot of people recognize that Priscilla and Aquila both, Priscilla was there teaching Apollos more correctly, right? Mm-hmm. None of these passages have anything to do with can a woman hold the office of elder or pastor in a local church congregation. And so I'm telling you again, there are complementarians who could agree with everything that Rick Warren just said and said so.
Yeah, I mean, that's me. I don't know when you grow up in the American South in a Southern Baptist church, or for sure in an independent Baptist church, you're going to you're going to run into couples that will pour into your life. You'll be what they call a young preacher boy, one of the young preacher boys, and you'll be asked to come over to people's houses, and men and women will pour into you. And in fact, it is often women who will spend, the most time with you, sitting there talking and asking about, your life and your family and all these kind of things. And so I've had many Aquila and Priscilla help me, and I didn't see it as a threat to complementarianism.
Yeah. So as an egalitarian, I have to say, once again, I don't like it when egalitarians try to run away from the quote-unquote problem texts when that's the only text that anyone's ever really actually interested in. Now, I understand, as an egalitarian, you do want to create an apparatus, a scaffolding, a theological framework which to view all the Bible. I understand that. But at the same time, when you're just trying to spitball, you need to do more than, I know those verses are there, but, right?
Well, I look down and William Billy Craig, who I really like, says Joshua Tanis is dropping truth bombs. So I looked up to see what truth bomb was dropped. And I know this isn't really what we're discussing here, but tell me, Pritchett, what do you think about this? When the apostles choose another apostle in Acts, one of the requirements was to be a male. Not even Mary, the mother of God, could qualify.
Well, again, I think Junia is quite clearly an apostle. So, I mean, women can be apostles. Mm-hmm. But that was the instance where they were trying to find Judas's replacement.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think you feel good about that answer.
Huh?
I don't think you feel good about that answer.
That doesn't mean that women can't be apostles.
Is that capital A apostle or little a apostle? Back to our previous discussion.
I think capital A, because one of the apostle just means in the ancient context, it was really just witness to the resurrection, and I think there were women who were witnesses to the resurrection.
Well, witness, but it means witness, and we know that capital A apostle definitely means witness
and witness to the resurrection. Yeah, I think Janiah was an apostle. I think all the attempts to make that Junius fail, and
all right, so, I put you on the spot, so.
No, it's fine. I just don't think that that's an argument that women can't be capital A apostles.
Gotcha.
Just because they were trying to replace Judas.
Gotcha. All right. Well,
and I agree with God's choice was Paul, not their thing. But anyway,
is there one more clip here?
No. I just threw that one in for extra. But I just want to say I do like Rick Warren. Generally, I do agree with his position on egalitarianism. I don't like his method for defending it or how he got there. Because and if you want to hear me talk for hours about 1 Timothy chapter 2 and 1 Corinthians 14, go check out the stuff on Trinity Radio Extra and leave a comment over there.
There have been people who have watched, I'll say this will get people to go watch it, and it's true. There have been people who have told me that after watching your discussion with Nick about that issue, they changed their mind.
After having watched Wingers, I know his series is not finished, but having listened to Winger week after week after week and just checking out our 3 or 4 hours compared to his 20 or 30.
Well, people are affected by the culture. They just want to believe whatever they want to believe. Don't care what the Bible says.
No.
I'm just kidding, folks.
So my thing is, I don't think he should appeal this. And I think he's wrong to, because I think the Southern Baptist Convention exists and defines its terms quite clearly on this issue. And if you don't agree with that, it's not just what he said, don't be where you're not wanted. You shouldn't want to be somewhere where they don't agree with you. You should want to either start, if you have 6,000 churches, that's a denomination, start your own. Or there's other Baptist traditions that do allow the ordination for women. Why wouldn't you want to be? Why wouldn't you want to be a part of a denomination that does this instead of causing a stink at the annual meeting in 2023?
As the nail it to the door moment. This is his moment. This is the moment. If I take him to
speak up for supposedly millions of women who didn't ask him to.
Well, I don't know if they asked him to.
For his male saviorism.
But if he really believes this, if he really is telling me the truth about everything and he's being completely sincere, then whatever the truth is about what he should do, then in his head, what he's doing is he's thinking, no, this has to end because God wants this to end, this not ordaining women.
Well, I want Calvinism to end, but I'm not going to go around demanding the Presbyterian.
You're not going to go to the Presbyterian
the PCA.
church.
Look, you got to get rid of this Westminster business.
No. What you do is you become a Presbyterian, really believing in Presbyterianism, and then after you've been there for a while, like 20 years or something, you change your mind, and then 3 years later, you're like, guys, I think we should all be Calvinists. So can we just all be Calvinists now, or not be Calvinists now? Yeah.
And what they were going to say is, you go become a Cumberland Presbyterian. They have that for you.
Yeah.
They have a Presbyterian church
And they
for
do.
you.
That's right.
Right. And that's what you should do, and that's what Rick Warren should do. Because what I don't want to see is a denomination that has defined its... Now, if Rick Warren had dropped the male saviorism business and decided that what I want to do is I want the Southern Baptist Convention to make a declarative statement on what issues are and are not bounds for fellowship instead of just giving one example in the Constitution, why not this one? I think they don't have to because they gave one example of something specified in the Baptist Faith and Message, and the women ordained is also a specific thing.
Yeah.
So I don't think it has to be there. But if he was wanting to say, we need to get clarity in the denomination of what is in and out of bounds, and maybe that's a good resolution to have or something, fine. But that's not what he wants. He wants to appeal his decision. He wants to tell all the Southern Baptist members and all of the 44,000 member churches that you have to disregard your test of cooperation because I've changed my mind. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is a little bit presumptuous and a little bit smacks of hubris.
Well, and it can be scary because, again, think about, do we want that in the future going forward? Do we want other positions because a guy has a big following and he's changed his mind, you know?
And if Nick Quint has grumbled his way through everything I've said, at least he can amen me on this one. If you are going to stir up this debate and have people look again at this issue, what we don't want, and Nick, I think, can amen at this one, is a whole new crop of complementarians that can't defend the position any better than Rick Warren can't. Mm-hmm. Because I don't want that either. Because we got enough bad complementarian arguments out there.
I also want, I want them to give the best arguments for egalitarianism they can. Because if it's not true, then I want us to know because we've dealt with the best. Jim Amberg says, I was today years old when I learned Cumberland Presbyterians existed. Well, if you go to Montgomery Bell State Park, about 30 miles west of Nashville on Interstate 40, you will you'll find there is a church, that like a historic building, and that was the first building, if I'm correct. I know there's a plaque there of the meeting of the Cumberland Presbyterians, and there's a sign there that explains that they did this because they did not want Calvinism. Yeah. And if you're not a Calvinist, it could make you salute. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. And there's a Cumberland Presbyterian church 5 minutes from both of our houses down there on Old Newburgh Road. So, yep, there you go, folks.
Let's get back to the poll, and then
we'll close.
You are
absolutely not winning me to the complementarian side of the debate. What you are winning me, what I've always been is, I don't really care much about this, but I've always been, denominations have the right to define the bounds of their own cooperation, and if you don't want to be within those bounds, leave. I don't go to Southern Baptist churches anymore. I don't have to affirm the SBC 2000 Faith and Message, whatever, if I did. But I also don't need to sit around telling everyone that I think that they're wrong about women pastors and that they're wrong about eternal security. That's not my job to do that in the church. And if I could potentially see, oh, you have a theology degree, you know, what do you think about these issues? And then I start fights in Sunday school class or whatever. It's never happened, but it could happen. Why don't I go somewhere that's either they don't, you know, they're not particular about that and they foster various opinions, which is a good environment, I think. It's iron sharpening iron type environment. Or go somewhere where everyone agrees with what you think on these issues, and there's not a problem. But I think Rick Warren is causing a problem.
Honestly, atheist, this is probably not your day. I'm glad you showed up anyway. We were missing you, but we're talking about some Southern Baptist stuff. But thanks for showing up and being here. Pritchett, I think we've reached the end of the show.
We have, and I didn't see a whole lot of people asking questions. I saw a lot of conversations, but...
there it is, 59
there
votes.
There you go.
74% say he should not.
I agree with this. I actually voted in that poll, too.
You voted?
I padded the numbers a little bit.
All right. Well, folks, I've really enjoyed this. I was looking for a moment. I have a bottle of water here. I was looking for a proper moment to throw water on Pritchett, but it didn't come. Show up next week and let's see if I find a moment to throw water on Pritchett. If you don't show up for any other reason, that's a good reason to show up. And the New Age to Jesus Diaries, Sarah, we are glad you're here. Give Sarah another shout out.
Sarah, the New Age to Jesus
Sarah!
Diaries. Go check out her channel on YouTube.
And with that,
I'm guessing she has other social medias too, but go check that out.
We'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.